Form public opinion that today we completed a historical strategic workshop to develop a common strategy for the resistance inside and outside Cuba. We've had over a dozen top leaders of the Cuban resistance travel to Miami for this meeting, which we're carrying out jointly with the most prominent activists here in Miami to develop a strategy for the coming events that will affect Cuba. And I want to welcome with great joy these brothers and sisters who have come from Cuba to meet, to plan, and then to return to the island to face repression and persecution in our struggle for a free and democratic Cuba. Every man and woman here who's come from Cuba has suffered multiple arrests and imprisonment, but I especially want to point out Hugo Damian Prieto Blanco, who recently was released from prison after spending months arbitrarily arrested without any process, any charges formally filed against him. He's here with us, and I want to welcome him, especially here. Nos alegra mucho, Hugo, en nombre de todos los presos políticos que estén aquí. This meeting, this joint coordination meeting, which again is unprecedented, this joint coordination meeting to develop a common plan of action, has been called together by the Assembly of the Cuban Resistance, which is one of the most active coalitions to the Cuban American community, and by the Forum for Rights and Freedoms inside Cuba, which is one of the most active coalitions within Cuba. So the two main coalitions have come together, and we've also had the participation of other organizations in the Cuban American community, like the Foundation for Judicial Relief, which Santiago Alvarez heads, and has also participated in these strategic meetings. We brought together different organizations from different parts of the island, from different constituencies inside and outside Cuba, for this historical coming together for a joint strategy for a change in the island. What brings us together is the desire for an end to the Castro dictatorship, for our insistence that for true change to happen to Cuba, the ruling elite in Cuba must abandon power, and that ruling elite is led by the entire Castro family. They must leave for Cuba to have real change. And we want this because it's the only way for Cuba to have a real democracy and for Cubans to truly enjoy and be able to exercise their fundamental freedoms. We're unified inside and outside Cuba in saying, this is the majority of the Cuban opposition, in saying that the Castro regime cannot be reformed. We've also, as a result of this meeting, we've had several agreements. I want to express to you some of those agreements. First of all, we support the Forum for Rights and Freedoms inside Cuba, who in the coming weeks will carry out a national meeting in Havana to discuss the state of the nation. We support them. We'll bring media and publicity to pay attention to this national meeting that will take place with Cubans from all over the island coming together to express the desire for change and the desire for genuine transformation of Cuba, of the Cuban people. We're also here to say that the exile community will come together to increase its support for the weekly marches of civil resistance. We all march, todos marchamos, which are taking place in Cuba every Sunday, led by our courageous ladies in white and supported by the Forum and other organizations. This campaign has extended itself throughout Cuba, and if you're following Cuban news, every week our people are out there on the streets peacefully demanding change and taking the blows and the arrest and the repression for the sake of a free and democratic Cuba. We want to announce that in the coming weeks, the Cuban American community, the Cuban exile community, is going to organize a march and a rally, a massive march and rally in support of the Cuban resistance in the island and of the weekly civil disobedience, daily civil disobedience they are carrying out inside Cuba. We're going to mobilize this community in their support and to show that we stand as one for change, for true change in Cuba. We also want to announce that jointly, inside and outside Cuba, we're going to support the flotilla for democracy in Cuba being organized by the democracy movement to take place on March 21st. Last but certainly not least, we're going to support the campaign that has been initiated inside Cuba by the National Civic Resistance Front, which says no to the dictatorship and yes to freedom. So these are some of the agreements we've reached. You're going to be seeing the results pretty soon over the next weeks, but we will make our voices for freedom heard inside and outside Cuba, because the Cuban people deserve, after so many years of tyranny, their freedom and their democracy. This will not be postponed.